"Ma'am, you'll need to order something or give up the table to a paying customer." The elderly woman looked up from the menu, but her eyes didn't seem to focus on Carla Whitman, the manager standing over her. "I only need another minute," she said. Carla folded her arms. The Amber Lantern Cafe would be packed soon, and the woman had been sitting alone at table 7 without ordering anything. Her black coat hung loosely off her shoulders. Her gray hair hadn't been brushed. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen, one hand trembling against the menu. To Carla, she looked like someone who'd wandered in from the cold, hoping nobody would notice she had no money. "This isn't a warming shelter," Carla said quietly. "I'm asking you to leave." At the next booth, Daniel Marsh stopped cutting his daughter's breakfast in half. Daniel was 40, a widowed single father who'd raised 8-year-old Lily alone since her mother passed 3 years earlier. 8 months ago, he'd also lost the refrigeration job he'd held for 13 years. Since then, delivery shifts and small repair jobs had barely kept a roof over their heads. That morning, he had $18.60 left after buying gas. The single breakfast skillet between him and Lily was already a luxury. 2 eggs, a little sausage, potatoes, 2 pieces of toast. Daniel had told Lily he wasn't hungry, so she'd eat without worrying about him. Lily sat across from him, a yellow knitted scarf wound twice around her neck. She'd been watching the elderly woman since she walked in. "Dad," Lily whispered, "she's shaking." Across the aisle, the woman slowly pushed back her chair. "I understand," she told Carla. Her voice carried no anger, only exhaustion. She buttoned her coat with unsteady fingers and turned toward the door. Lily looked at her father. "She can have some of mine." Daniel watched the woman take one slow step, then another. He knew what it felt like to leave a place while pretending the humiliation didn't sting. "Ma'am," Daniel called. The woman stopped. Daniel pulled an empty chair toward their table. "You can sit with us." Carla's expression tightened. "Mr. Marsh, she hasn't ordered." Daniel met her eyes. "She's sitting at a table that's already paid for." The elderly woman looked between Daniel and Lily. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know." That answer made her pause. Daniel raised a hand toward a passing server. "Could we get one more bowl, please?" Carla stepped closer. "You can't turn one meal into a free service arrangement." "We're not asking for another meal." Daniel divided the skillet carefully, a small portion into Lily's bowl, a smaller one into his own, and the rest into the empty bowl. Lily moved a piece of toast onto the woman's plate. Then she slid out of the booth, unwound the yellow scarf from her neck, and walked around the table. "You can borrow this until your ride comes." The woman stared at the scarf. For the first time, something cracked through the numbness on her face. "My ride?" Lily nodded. "Seriously, my dad says people shouldn't wait outside when it's this cold." Daniel had never said those exact words, but he didn't correct her. The woman let Lily settle the scarf around her shoulders. It was still warm from the girl's neck. "Thank you," she whispered. Lily climbed back into the booth. "I'm Lily." The woman touched the edge of the scarf. "Margaret." Daniel slid the bowl toward her. "I'm Daniel." He had no idea that the woman now wearing his daughter's scarf still controlled the company that wrecked his professional reputation. Margaret looked at the small portions in front of them. "You were already sharing this." "We still are," Daniel said. She noticed the water in his glass. No coffee, no second plate, no side order. She noticed how he nudged the larger share of potatoes toward Lily when the girl wasn't looking. "You should eat," Margaret told him. "So should you." For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then Lily picked up her fork. "It gets cold fast." That drew the faintest smile out of Margaret. They started eating. Outside, late November wind pushed dry leaves down the avenue. Inside, the cafe smelled of coffee, butter, and cinnamon. Margaret took one bite of egg, then set her fork down. Her eyes filled. Lily glanced at her father, unsure if she'd done something wrong. Daniel shook his head gently. Margaret pressed a napkin to her mouth. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to be," Daniel said. She looked toward table 7, the one Carla made her leave. "My son used to sit there." Daniel waited. "He loved the blueberry pancakes here." Margaret went on. "Even once he was old enough to know they weren't very good." Lily glanced at the menu. "They look good in the picture." Margaret laughed once, but the sound broke into a breath. "Today would have been his birthday." Daniel understood. He didn't ask how her son died. He didn't tell her everything happens for a reason. He didn't reach for a smooth sentence meant to make grief easier for everyone except the person carrying it. He just slid the napkin holder closer. Lily touched Margaret's sleeve. "My mom died too." Daniel's hand paused. Lily rarely brought it up first. Margaret looked at her. "How old were you?" "5. A pause. "I'm sorry." Lily nodded. "Dad still makes her pancakes on her birthday." Daniel looked down. "They're usually burned." Margaret smiled through her tears. For the first time in 10 days, she felt something besides the silence of her own house. Then a sharp electronic alarm went off near the counter. A display on the refrigerated dessert case flashed red. Carla hurried over and hit a button. The alarm stopped. Daniel turned in his seat. The display still read 48 degrees. A bead of water ran off the lower edge of the case and pooled on the tile. The compressor gave a rough, uneven hum.
Daniel listened. "Carla," he called. She looked back, already irritated. "That case needs to be checked. It does that sometimes. The temperature's too high. It was opened during the morning delivery." Daniel glanced at the fogged glass. "It's been warm longer than that." Carla walked toward him. "You're here as a customer." "Yes." "Then let the staff handle it." "I'm trying to help you handle it." Her eyes dropped to his faded delivery jacket. "What qualifies you to diagnose our equipment from a booth?" 13 years in commercial refrigeration. Carla gave a thin smile, and Daniel understood the real question underneath hers. Now he delivered packages. Now he fixed washing machines in apartment basements. Now people saw the work jacket and assumed the job he'd lost proved he'd never deserved it. "Now I'm telling you the dairy and cream products in that case need to be checked with a calibrated thermometer." Carla shook her head. "You're not authorized to touch company equipment." "I haven't touched it." He pointed at the condensation. "Move the perishables to the walk-in. Put a hold on anything that's been above safe temperature. Call your refrigeration contractor. We have procedures. Then follow them." Lily sat very still. She'd seen adults talk to her father this way before. They heard the words "delivery driver" and stopped listening to everything else. A young server named Sarah stepped out from behind the counter. "I can check it," she said. Carla turned sharply. "I said it's fine." Sarah looked at the display. "It says 48, because the door was opened." Daniel spoke quietly. "Check the milk near the center." Carla stared at him, then at the customers who'd started watching. "Fine," she said. "We'll prove it's fine." Sarah sanitized the probe and tested a carton of milk. She waited. 47. The room shifted. Daniel stood, but kept his distance from the case. "Move the food. Mark the time. Don't serve anything from that unit until the contractor clears it." Carla opened her mouth. The alarm sounded again. Sarah began moving product. Another employee joined her. Daniel sat back down. He hadn't opened a panel or guessed at anything. He'd recognized a warning sign and asked the staff to verify it. Margaret watched him carefully. "You knew what that sound meant?" "I knew what it could mean," he said. "There's a difference, a big one." He looked toward the case. "A warning tells you to stop and check. It doesn't give you permission to guess." A man walked in wearing a dark wool coat, in his late 60s, silver-haired, visibly relieved when he spotted Margaret. "Mrs. Colton." Carla froze. The man crossed the room quickly. "I'm sorry, there was nowhere to park. I had to circle the block." "It's all right, Walter." Carla stared at the woman in the yellow scarf. Then her eyes shifted to an old black-and-white photograph near the register, a much younger Margaret Colton standing beside her husband in front of the first Golden Harvest market. The caption underneath read in gold lettering, "Margaret and Thomas Colton, founders." The Amber Lantern Cafe was owned by Golden Harvest Foods. Every paycheck in the building carried Margaret Colton's company name. "Mrs. Colton," Carla said, "I didn't recognize you." Margaret looked at her for a long moment. That was the problem. Carla stepped forward. "I was trying to protect the dining experience." "From what?" Carla had no answer. "From a grieving old woman sitting alone. I didn't know who you were." "How many people have you sent back into the cold because you assumed they didn't matter?" Carla's lips parted, but nothing came out. Margaret didn't demand she be fired. Instead, she looked toward the refrigerated case. "Preserve the camera footage from this morning. Keep the temperature logs, alarm history, and maintenance records for that unit." Carla swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "Call the licensed contractor. Document what they find." "Yes, ma'am." Margaret turned to Sarah. "Thank you for checking." Sarah looked stunned. Walter pulled out his phone and started taking notes. Daniel gathered the empty bowls. "You don't need to do that," Carla said quickly. He looked at her. "I know." Margaret stood and began unwinding Lily's scarf. Lily reached across the table. "You can keep it until you're home." Margaret held it against her chest. "Then I'll make sure it gets back to you." Daniel reached into his jacket and handed her a plain business card. Daniel Marsh, Appliance, Repair, and Refrigeration Support. His number printed underneath. Margaret read it. Something about the name tugged at her memory, but grief had blurred the last several months into one gray corridor. "Thank you, Mr. Marsh." "For breakfast?" Daniel asked. "Or for seeing me?" Lily smiled. "We saw you because you were right there." Margaret looked at the girl. "Yes," she said. "I suppose I was." Walter helped her into a black sedan at the curb. As the car pulled away, Daniel returned to the table and counted the remaining bills in his wallet. Lily watched him. "Are we in trouble?" "No." "Did we spend too much?"
Daniel looked at the empty skillet. "We spent what we chose to spend." Lily considered that. Was she really a billionaire? That's what the picture said. She looked pleased. She still needed my scarf. Daniel smiled. Yes, she did. By that afternoon, an independent contractor had inspected the refrigerated case. A failing relay had kept the unit from holding a safe temperature for nearly 2 hours. Because the food had been moved quickly, the cafe avoided serving spoiled product and avoided a loss of almost $5,000. The contractor also found that similar alarms had been silenced 3 times in the previous month without a full service visit. At 3:15, Margaret sat in the back of her car outside the home she'd barely left in 10 days. Lily's yellow scarf stayed around her shoulders. The house beyond the window looked exactly as it had that morning, curtains closed, lights off. Her son Michael's unopened birthday cards still sat on the hall table because she hadn't been able to throw them away. He would have turned 49. For days, visitors had come through that house with documents. Approve this, sign that, transfer authority. Daniel had asked for an empty bowl. Margaret called Rachel Doyle, Golden Harvest's general counsel. "I need you to verify someone." "Who?" "Daniel Marsh." "What am I verifying?" "His refrigeration credentials, his work history, anything connected to Golden Harvest." A pause. "Was he involved in the cafe incident?" "He kept it from getting worse." "I'll look. And Rachel, do it quietly." 2 hours later, Rachel called back, her tone different. "Daniel Marsh worked for Golden Harvest for 13 years. Margaret sat up straighter. "In what division?" "Cold storage operations, senior systems technician." "Why did he leave?" "He didn't leave. He was terminated 8 months ago." Margaret looked down at the scarf. "For what?"
The file says insubordination and failure to support management direction. Any safety violations? No. Attendance problems? No. One written warning issued shortly before termination. For what? Refusing to sign a commissioning report. Margaret felt a memory surface. Months earlier, Michael had mentioned a technician caught in a dispute over a new cold storage facility, said the man might have been punished for refusing to sign off on something. Michael was already sick by then. A nurse had come in and the conversation ended. Margaret had never asked about it again. Who signed the termination? Rachel hesitated. Victor Lang. Victor was Margaret's nephew. He'd become acting chief executive after Michael entered the hospital. Since the funeral, he'd called daily, asking when she'd approve the transfer of voting authority. Pull the full file. I may need authorization from operations. You have mine. The next morning, Victor Lang walked into his office on the 32nd floor of Golden Harvest's Denver headquarters. 47, immaculately dressed, known for making people feel like their job depended on every sentence they spoke. His assistant told him legal had requested records related to Daniel Marsh. Victor stopped walking. Why? She didn't say who made the request. Rachel Doyle. Victor shut his office door. 8 months earlier, Daniel had delayed the opening of a regional cold storage facility by refusing to sign off on the final report. The project was behind schedule. Vendors were threatening penalties. Investors had been promised an opening date. Daniel said the temperature data wasn't stable enough to prove the system would hold under a full load. Victor called it excessive caution. When Daniel wouldn't soften his conclusion, Victor pulled him off the project, then out of the company. He'd considered the matter closed, until now. He called Margaret. She answered on the 5th ring. "Aunt Margaret, I heard you went to the cafe yesterday." "I did." "You should have told security." "I had Walter." "It wasn't safe. You haven't been eating." The concern in his voice was smooth and practiced. "I met Daniel Marsh," she said. Silence. "That explains the legal request. Tell me about him." "A resentful former employee who wouldn't follow the chain of command. He recognized a refrigeration failure from across a restaurant. That doesn't change what happened." "What did happen?" "He delayed a major project and undermined leadership in front of contractors." "What instruction did he refuse?" "To revise an unnecessarily alarming report." "Was the report wrong?" "It was incomplete." "That is not what I asked." Victor walked to the window. "Aunt Margaret, you're grieving. Marsh saw you in a vulnerable moment and attached himself to you. He didn't know my name. He says he shared the only meal he could afford with me. That kind of gesture creates emotional leverage. His daughter gave me her scarf. Children can be persuasive." Margaret closed her eyes. "I want the full file." "You have people for that." "Yes, they're already working on it." She ended the call. That evening, Daniel was replacing a washing machine drain pump in an apartment basement when his phone rang. "Mr. Marsh." "Yes." "This is Margaret Colton." He sat back on his heels. "Did the scarf make it home?" "It did. It's the warmest thing in my house." He waited. "The contractor confirmed your warning about the refrigerator." "I'm glad they caught it." "I also learned you worked for Golden Harvest." His hand tightened on the phone. "I did." "Why didn't you tell me?" "You were eating breakfast." "That is not an answer." "It's the answer I have." Margaret stayed quiet. Daniel wiped grease from his fingers with a rag. "I didn't help you because of your company. I didn't know it was your company until your driver walked in. And after I knew, I wasn't going to discuss my personnel file in front of my daughter." "I would like to hear what happened with my lawyer present." "Where?" "Rachel Doyle's office. Neutral location. The meeting will be documented." Daniel considered it. He'd spent 8 months avoiding Golden Harvest, avoiding former coworkers, avoiding the building where security had watched him pack 13 years of his life into a cardboard box. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "The truth. And if it embarrasses your company, then the company should be embarrassed. Daniel looked at the broken pump on the floor. He thought about Lily asking if they'd need to move again. He thought about every job application that asked whether he'd ever been fired for cause. "I'll be there." 2 days later, Daniel walked into Rachel Doyle's office in his cleanest work shirt. Margaret was already seated at the conference table, Lily's scarf folded beside her. Rachel sat across from them with a laptop and a recorder. "This is a fact-finding meeting. It is not a job offer, a settlement, or a promise of corrective action. I understand." Rachel walked through his employment history: 13 years, no safety violations, strong reviews, promoted twice. Then the Northfield Cold Storage Project. A subcontractor had installed lower-cost components instead of the models specified in the design. Daniel hadn't claimed the substitutes were automatically dangerous. His objection was simpler. The test results didn't prove the system could hold stable temperatures under a full operating load. "What did you recommend?" Rachel asked. "Use the specified components or repeat the full test for 72 hours. What was Victor's response? He said the facility had an opening date, and I was turning an engineering question into a moral performance. And you? I understood the deadline." Daniel looked at Rachel. "I also understood my name would be on the certification." Rachel opened a scanned report. "This is the final document in your personnel file." Daniel read the conclusion. "That isn't my report." "How is it different?" "I wrote that the stability data was insufficient. This says the variation was within expected conditions. Did you make that change?" "No." "Did you authorize it?" "No." Margaret's face went still. "What happened after you refused to sign?" "I was removed from the project. 2 weeks later, I was fired." "Did you appeal?" "Yes. I was told management had acted within its discretion." Margaret studied him. "What did it cost you?" Daniel looked away. "That isn't part of the technical record. It is part of the truth." He hesitated, then told them. He'd lost his health insurance, sold his truck to stay current on rent. The termination language made other industrial employers cautious. He'd moved Lily out of the duplex she'd lived in since her mother died, into a smaller apartment. "Does Lily know why?" "She knows I changed jobs, that's all."
"She's 8. Daniel leaned back. "I wasn't going to turn my daughter into an audience for a fight between adults." Rachel stopped the recorder. "I need to search the archived review files." Margaret's breath caught. "Why?" Before he entered the hospital, Michael asked legal to preserve records connected to contractor substitutions and maintenance reductions. His review was never finished. The archive turned up the next morning. Daniel's original test data, photographs of the substituted parts, and an email from Victor. The language needs to reflect business judgment, not technician anxiety. Adjust the conclusion and keep us on schedule. Rachel also found a short note from Michael. "Marsh's termination requires independent review. The technical record does not support the personnel conclusion." Margaret read it twice. Her son hadn't finished the investigation, but he'd seen enough to question what the company had done. The board was scheduled to vote on Victor's permanent appointment Monday. Margaret told Rachel they received this before the vote. Victor learned about the archive before the weekend. Saturday morning, he met privately with Carla in the cafe office. Carla had already received written notice that her treatment of Margaret was under review. She was frightened and ashamed. Victor slid a draft statement across the desk. "This gives legal the full context." Carla read it. It said Daniel had interfered with company equipment, disrupted service, and used the incident to approach Margaret. "That isn't what happened." "You told him not to touch the case." "He didn't touch it. He told Sarah to check the temperature, and the food was removed because of that." "The contractor said the case was failing." Victor leaned in. "The board will be deciding whether your judgment can still be trusted." Carla looked at the paper. It wasn't a direct threat. It didn't need to be. "I need time," she said. "You don't have much." He left the statement on her desk. Sunday, Rachel reviewed the footage. It was clear. Daniel never touched the case. Carla silenced the alarm. Sarah ran the temperature check. Employees moved the food once the reading confirmed the problem. The footage also showed Margaret sitting with Daniel and Lily before Walter ever revealed who she was. When Rachel interviewed Carla, the manager started by repeating Victor's version. Halfway through, she stopped. "He wanted me to make Marsh sound dangerous." "Did he threaten you?" "Not directly." "What did he say?" "That the board would decide whether my judgment could still be trusted." Carla pushed the draft statement across the table. "I was wrong about Mrs. Colton. I'm not signing another wrong thing to protect myself." Monday's board meeting opened at 9. It had originally been scheduled to confirm Victor Lang as permanent chief executive. Instead, Rachel opened with a motion to revise the agenda. Victor sat at the far end of the table. Margaret sat at the center, for the first time since Michael's funeral, wearing something other than black. Lily's yellow scarf rested around her neck. Rachel laid out the evidence in order. Daniel's original test data, the altered conclusion, Victor's email, the disciplinary action that began right after Daniel refused to sign, Michael's note, the cafe footage, Carla's draft statement, and her account of Victor's pressure. Victor stayed composed. "This is being framed without operational context. The facility opened successfully. The system was adjusted. No product was lost. No one was injured." A board member named Harold Price leaned forward. "Was the system adjusted before or after Marsh refused to certify it?" Victor paused. "After. So additional testing was needed." His concern was addressed. "After he was removed." Victor's jaw tightened. He wasn't terminated for raising a concern. He was terminated for how he raised it. Harold gestured toward Daniel, who'd been invited only to answer technical questions, still in his clean work shirt. "Mr. Marsh, was the original system proven unsafe?" "No." "Was it proven stable under full operating load?" "No." "What did you refuse to sign?" "A statement saying the data showed stable operation." "Why?" "Because it didn't." Victor turned toward him. "You could have respected the chain of command. I used the appeal process. You challenged executive judgment in front of contractors. I answered a commissioning question in front of the people doing the commissioning. You delayed a $9 million facility. The system delayed the facility." The room went quiet. Victor's face hardened. "You always believed your technical opinion outweighed the needs of the company." Daniel looked at him. Refusing to sign something unproven wasn't disloyalty. It was the job. Rachel pulled up the draft statement Victor had handed Carla. This was created after legal reopened Mr. Marsh's file. Victor glanced at the door. "Carla misunderstood my request." "Did you ask her to state that Mr. Marsh interfered with the equipment?" "I asked for a complete account."
Did you review the footage first? No. Did you suggest her job depended on how the board viewed her judgment? Victor didn't answer. Margaret finally spoke. You told me Daniel used my grief to attach himself to me. I was protecting you. No, her voice was quiet. You were protecting the story you'd already decided on. Victor leaned forward. Aunt Margaret, you met a former employee while you were grieving. You're letting one breakfast steer corporate governance? Margaret touched the yellow scarf. The breakfast didn't create the evidence. She looked at Michael's note on the screen. It made me willing to see it. The board went into executive session. Daniel waited in an empty conference room, not knowing whether his record would be corrected, not knowing whether the company would offer anything beyond regret. His phone buzzed, a message from Lily. Did the truth win yet? He typed back,
they're still listening. 23 minutes later, Rachel came in. The board has suspended Victor Lang from all executive authority pending an independent investigation. Daniel nodded slowly. And the CEO appointment? Removed from consideration. And my file? Your termination is now listed as disputed pending final review. Compensation and benefits will be evaluated after the investigation. That isn't the same as clearing my name. No, Rachel said. It's the beginning. 6 weeks later, the independent investigation confirmed that Victor had tampered with technical reporting, retaliated against Daniel, concealed contract substitutions from the board, and pressured Carla into a misleading statement. The board terminated him. He lost his succession bonus and any path to chief executive. His remaining financial and contractual issues went to outside counsel. Daniel's personnel record was formally corrected. Golden Harvest acknowledged his objection had been valid and his dismissal retaliatory. A negotiated agreement restored his lost compensation, benefits, and retirement contributions. Margaret offered him a senior executive position. He turned it down. He didn't want gratitude placing him in a role he hadn't earned. Instead, he accepted a 30-day independent assessment contract, reviewing maintenance records at 3 facilities and presenting his findings to a hiring panel that included no one from Margaret's family. At the end of it, Golden Harvest offered him a position suited to his experience: Regional Maintenance Integrity Supervisor. It didn't make him rich. It gave him stable hours, health insurance for Lily, and work that let him sign his own name without compromising what it meant. Carla faced consequences too: a formal warning, loss of management duties during retraining, a required review on customer treatment and food safety procedures. Victor had pressured her, but he hadn't made her judge Margaret by her coat. That choice had been hers. She cooperated with the investigation and apologized without asking for instant forgiveness. On Victor's last day, he turned in his access card and gathered his remaining files. Daniel was leaving Rachel's office when they crossed paths in the corridor. Victor looked older without the authority he'd spent years chasing. Neither spoke at first. Then Victor said, "I thought you were trying to embarrass me. I was trying to not sign a false report. I know that now." Daniel waited. Victor glanced toward the closed boardroom doors. The person I treated like an obstacle was the person protecting the company. Daniel's expression didn't change. Knowing that doesn't repair it. No, what I do next might. Victor nodded. He didn't ask for his job back or demand forgiveness. He kept cooperating with the audit and handed over every record investigators requested. Margaret slowly returned to public life. The grief never disappeared. She still woke some mornings reaching for the phone before remembering Michael would never call. But she started visiting Daniel and Lily. First, just dinner, then Lily's school music program, then a Saturday science fair where Lily built a cardboard model of a refrigerated truck and proudly announced that warm milk was bad business and also gross. Margaret laughed harder than anyone in the room. One evening, she sat at Daniel's kitchen table, mending a loose seam in the yellow scarf. "Grandma Margaret, you missed a spot." The room went quiet. "Is that okay?" Lily asked. Margaret's hands stopped moving. "Yes," she whispered, "that is very okay." Golden Harvest restored the community meal program Michael had once championed. Customers facing hardship could request food discreetly. No one had to explain themselves in front of a crowded room. No one was filmed for advertising. No employee was allowed to turn a person's hunger into company publicity. A small brass bowl was placed near the register at every Amber Lantern cafe. Customers could contribute quietly, and Golden Harvest matched the donations every month. The first bowl went up at the original location. Several months after the morning that changed all 3 of their lives, Daniel, Lily, and Margaret came back to the cafe. The wind outside was sharp, but the sky was clear. Carla greeted them at the door. "Good morning, Mrs. Colton." "Good morning, Carla." Carla looked at Daniel. "Mr. Marsh?" Then at Lily. "I like your scarf." Lily smiled. "It's warm." They sat at table 7. Daniel ordered 3 full breakfasts, blueberry pancakes for Margaret, eggs and toast for Lily, coffee and a skillet for himself. When the food came, Lily looked at the portions and grinned. "This is way more than last time." "Things are better," Daniel said. Lily glanced toward the brass community bowl at the register. A folded card beside it read, "No one should have to prove they deserve a warm meal." She slid out of the booth and came back, carrying an empty bowl. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What's that for?" Lily set it in the center of the table, "In case somebody needs it." Margaret touched the yellow scarf around her shoulders, the same scarf a little girl had once given her, back when nobody knew her name. A few minutes later, an older man walked in alone. His coat was thin, his hands red from the cold. He stood near the register, studying the prices, not sitting down. Lily looked at her father. Daniel looked at Margaret. Margaret lifted the empty bowl. Then she waved the man toward table 7.